So good morning and welcome. My name is Reverend Dr. Ron Fox, and I'd like to welcome you to this Sunday morning celebration for the Center for Spiritual Living, Space Coast. And if there's anybody watching this at any time who's never been to a Center for Spiritual Living, we believe there's one God, many paths to that God, and we're here to love, honor, and support you, no matter what your divine path is. And the Center for Spiritual Living, Space Coast is a safe haven for people of all beliefs and lifestyles, whoever you are and wherever you find yourself on your journey of faith, you're welcome here. And to open our service this morning, our two practitioners, Patrice and Edgar Rivera, are going to open us with a prayer and a spiritual reading.
So let's just take that deep breath in, sink down, settle in. Breathe into that heart center. That is the place that we absolutely remember the truth of who each and every one of us really is. For it is in that place that we remember that there is only one. There is only that one song, one love, one connection, one garden, one ocean, one sky, one heart, one. And we remember that in that oneness, that includes me. That includes everything that I see, everything that I touch, everything that I do, everything. And that is a universal I for each and every one of us. For there really is no separation if there really is only one. So in this place of absolutely knowing our divinity, our oneness, our truth, I live, move, and have my being in that place. And from that place, I absolutely know that as I stand in that place, as I stay in that place of absolutely remembering my unity, then there can be no separation. And I rejoice in that. I revel in that as I reveal the true nature as the divine intended. As I breathe. And from this place, I absolutely know that this gathering of like-minded souls and spirits is absolutely blessed. I absolutely know that every word out of Dr. Reverend Ron's mouth is exactly what somebody needs to hear. Maybe we don't even realize it as it percolates in our subconscious, but it's healing. It's hope, it's healthy, it is love. And in that, I absolutely rejoice. And in that infusion of love and remembrance, I know that it is truly so. And so it is.
So it is.
So it is.
This morning, I have a few thoughts to share from Karen Samuelson. I welcome positivity into my life. I am at peace with what is happening. Today is a clean slate. I am gentle with myself and others. I transform negative energy into love and light. I forgive myself and release my worries to the Creator. And I realize that I can't be both awesome and negative, and so I choose one.
Thank you. So my message title today is Releasing Negativity. And I see in our country, there's so much anger and so much negativity and actually so much hatred still going on. I just wanted to speak this morning on what we could do as spiritual people to move beyond that. You know, and it doesn't mean that we have to change our political beliefs. It doesn't mean that people that did anything that was illegal or wrong doesn't get punished. You know, it just means we can focus on whatever's happening without such negativity, without such hatred, and without such anger. And so I want to begin with a couple of quotes. The first is from Ernest Holmes, who founded the Center for Spiritual Living. And he wrote, "Hate casts the one who indulges in it into a prison of his own making. God has built no walls, locked no doors, and casts none in prison. All prisons are self-created." And actually, what gave me the impetus is I knew I wanted to speak on this, but what really pushed me over was a friend of mine named Reverend Kathleen Beasley put something on her Facebook page that as soon as I saw it, I said, oh, I need to use this. And it's a quote from Nelson Mandela, who wrote, "As I walked out the door toward my freedom, I knew if I did not leave all the anger, the hatred, and the bitterness behind, that I would still be in prison." And you know, I read something years ago, and I saw it again this week, about two friends who had been in a Nazi concentration camp, and years later, after they've been liberated, they go back and they're walking through the camp, and one turns to the other and he said, "Have you forgiven them?" And his friend said, "Yes." And the first fella said, "You know, I haven't. I still hate them." And his buddy said, then I guess they still have you in prison. So Robert Taylor is from South Africa, and he wrote a book titled A New Way to Be Human. And in the book, one of the concept he discusses is enclosures. And he doesn't write and he doesn't speak about physical enclosures, you know, like a prison, like I've just been talking about, but he defines them as actions and beliefs that keep you from being who you're meant to be. He said it's when we allow ourselves to be confined by unacceptable boundaries that are drawn by others. And he said so often when we do that, we live with a lack of compassion for ourselves and for others. And I read a story this week, and I know Becky read it too, because we talked about it a little, about somebody who was a white nationalist. And he became a white nationalist because when he was a young boy, his family moved to a new area. And when he went to the new school, he was bullied. And the white nationalist people were the ones that accepted him. And so that's where he went. And he stayed that way for years and years and years, and even became a recruiter for them. And then after 9/11, he joined the service. And he was over, didn't say where, whether it was Iraq or Afghanistan, but he was somewhere where his group was ambushed. And he was about to die. He realized that somebody had a bead on him, and he was about to die when at the last moment, an African-American soldier saved his life. And the soldier that saved his life did it despite the fact he knew what this fellow believed and espoused. And he said, you know, that's what started me on a different road. And eventually he changed and changed his beliefs. And one of the things that brought him to do that, he had a daughter. And he thought to himself, I don't want my daughter to grow up with the hate that I grew up with. And now he writes that it's all about human connection. He said, you have to have that connection, that hate has no place in our society. And there's a Bible story that's kind of unique. That one day Jesus and is walking um, and with the disciples, and they pass by a fig tree that has leaves on it but has no fruit. And Jesus turns and he says, "Let no fruit grow on that tree forever." And it was the only time in the Bible that Jesus used his power in that way. And Ernest Holmes, writing about it, says, well, nobody knows exactly why he did it. And Holmes speculates that he did it to show what negative thought can do, because I guess I forgot to say this, the tree kind of shriveled up right then and there. And a lesson that we can learn from that is to bless rather than to curse. And our attitude towards life should be uplifting, should be life gifting. And I have to tell you, I learned a new term this week from Eric Butterworth, the late Unity minister. He coined a phrase that's absolutely new to me. He called it verbal toxemia. Verbal toxemia. And he said, it's the toxic effect of negative words. And he said, it's not good enough to spend a few minutes a day doing positive affirmations, he's saying, it's not good enough to spend a few minutes a day doing a spiritual practice. And then for the rest of the day, being negative. He said there are no timeouts in the subconscious mind. And the subconscious mind can't take a joke. It doesn't know what's real and what's not real. And Holmes says something similar to what Butterworth started saying. This isn't a quote, it's a paraphrase, but Holmes says, doing spiritual practice for 15 minutes a day isn't going to save your life. What will save your life is 51% of your thinking, meaning the preponderance of the thoughts that you put out into the universe. So I've talked before about a book by Wendy Craig Purcell titled Ask Yourself This. And the book is basically a series of questions that she asks, and then she discusses each question. And one of the questions in the book is, how safe is it for people to walk through the corridors of your mind? How safe is it for people to walk through the corridors of your mind? And she said the question challenges us to examine our secret, private thoughts about what we think about other people. And she said, I love this. She said, if your secret thoughts were broadcast on a public address system, would you have to run and hide, or would you feel peaceful and happy? Because Becky and I talked about this next thing this week. No matter what our judgments are, they reveal more about ourselves than they do about the person we're judging. Joel Goldsmith, who is a spiritual writer, talks about how do we know when the Spirit of God dwells within us. And he says, we know that when we let go of hate, of envy, of malice, of jealousy, of prejudice, and of bias. And he said, when we do that, when we get rid of them, then we're making room for the Spirit of God. And as long as these qualities are present within us, we've got more work to do. And let me give you a quote. He wrote, God and man are one, and there is no way to love God without some of that love flowing to our neighbor. And then he said, I think this is really, really an interesting point. He said, unless we do unto others as we want them to do unto us, we injure ourselves. We don't injure the other. He says, evil thoughts, dishonest acts, and thoughtless words. He said, they do harm others temporarily, but ultimately, in the end, the injury was not greatest to them as it was to us. So he's saying when we do those things, maybe we cause a little injury to the other people, but we bring a great deal more energy onto us. So what are some easy, simple things we can do to catch ourselves? You know, and I'm not saying that they're easy to do, but we can do them if we think about it. We can try to see the good in other people. We can give them the benefit of the doubt. We can listen with an open mind. And so rather than listening and while we're listening, preparing our response, we can try to listen with an open mind. We can practice tolerance. We can practice forgiveness. You know, nobody's born with a bad attitude. Think about that. Nobody's born, little children aren't born with a bad attitude. But many of us die with a bad attitude. And why? It's because we think negatively. But a thought is only a thought, and we can change our thoughts. The truth is that we can't have peace anywhere until we have it within. And I saw something this week about a minister who was kind of disillusioned. And so he stepped down from his pulpit for a while. And one day he was somewhere and he heard that one of his congregants had died. So he went to his house to be with this congregant's wife, who was also a member of his center. And he thought to himself that, he had done this so many times, he knew just what to say. And just as he was about to say something to her, he heard this inner voice that said, say nothing, just think peace. And he listened to it. And a while later, 10 or 15 minutes later, or 5 minutes, whatever it was, he was about to say something again. And again, he heard this voice that said, say nothing, just think inner peace. And he and the widow sat there. And after about an hour, she said to him, I can't understand this. My husband is lying dead in bed upstairs, and yet I am experiencing more peace than I have ever felt in my life. And the minister felt the same thing. This person who was so disillusioned, for the first time in his life, knew what the peace of God was. And the point of this story is when we accept peace for ourselves, it's felt by others. And that's how we're going to transform the world and our country, not by anger and hatred. The Course in Miracles says, I must have chosen wrongly because I'm not at peace. So I read an article this week by a lady named Lorna Blake, and the article is titled, "Show Respect Despite Differences of Opinion." And she writes in there that we're all different. We come from different backgrounds, from different belief systems, from different places. And so we don't share the same perspectives on life. And those differences can lead to conflict. But she said, but when we have respect for everybody, that allows us to authentically communicate while appreciating the difference. And she said, judgment, when we judge others, that undermines that respect. And she said, so think about this. When you're not willing to listen, check yourself and see if you're coming from a place of judgment. You know, we're all unique. We have different stories. We have different ways of seeing things. And there's nothing wrong with that. What's wrong is seeing people who differ from us like the enemy, because we can all learn from each other. You know, there's a story, maybe many of you have heard this, about a young Native American boy who comes to his grandfather and he says, you know, I feel like there are two dogs in my head and they're always fighting. One is kind and wise, and the other is mean and ugly. And he says to his grandfather, who will win? And his grandfather says, whichever one you feed, which means whichever one he puts his attention on. And I thought to ask yourself, where are you putting your attention? So I want to close with something from the book Words That Heal by Ernest Holmes. He said, it is only when we view life from the standpoint of an expanding soul, destined forever to exist somewhere, that we can make either sense or sanity out of human experience. If we view life from the standpoint that each is an evolving soul, destined to live forever somewhere, we shall see that in the long run, life must return to us that which we reflect into it. In the long run, only the merciful receive mercy. Hate will beget hate, and love will give birth to that which is lovely. Joy will find joy, and peace join with peace. Thank you for being here. God bless you, and have a great week.